These are 20 hidden facts about Howard Hawks' 1966 Western El Dorado that even devoted John Wayne fans have never heard. This is the story of the only film that truly paired two of Hollywood's greatest Western legends, a production filled with personal feuds, pranks that nearly turned violent, a script that was supposed to kill Duke at the end, and secrets that stayed buried for nearly 60 years. El Dorado holds a unique place in Western film history. $4,653,000 went into making it, and $12 million came back at the domestic box office, turning it into one of the most commercially successful Westerns of the 1960s. But behind that success lies a collection of stories that never reached the press junkets or fan magazines of the era. If you grew up watching John Wayne ride across the screen, if Robert Mitchum defined what a tough guy looked like, if the name Howard Hawks still brings back memories of Saturday afternoons at the picture show, then you're about to discover that this film you thought you knew has been keeping secrets from you for decades. Let's get into the first one. Fact number 1. This was Wayne and Mitchum's only true co-starring film. Here's something that shocks even dedicated Western fans. John Wayne and Robert Mitchum, two of the biggest names in Western cinema history, two men who defined masculine heroism for an entire generation, appeared together as co-leads exactly once. Wayne made over 170 films across his career, and Mitchum appeared in more than 120. Both men were synonymous with the Western genre, and both were box office gold, and yet El Dorado stands alone as their singular true collaboration, which means you're not just watching a Howard Hawks Western when you watch this film. You're watching the only time two of cinema's greatest cowboys rode together as equals. Fact number 2. Mitchum was banned from Wayne's home for over a decade. When Hawks invited Mitchum to join El Dorado, he was asking Wayne to work with a man who had been effectively exiled from Duke's personal life for years, and that's because of what happened on a film called Blood Alley back in 1955. Mitchum was originally cast as the lead, but he got himself fired after reportedly pushing the film's transportation manager into San Francisco Bay. John Wayne wasn't just an actor on Blood Alley, he was the producer, which meant when Mitchum got fired, Wayne had to step in and take over the lead role himself. That forced a complete restructuring of the production schedule, causing delays that hit Wayne where it hurt most. His honeymoon with his third wife Pilar had to be postponed. Pilar Wayne never forgave Robert Mitchum for that. According to multiple accounts, Mitchum was banned from the Wayne home for years afterward. The two men could be professional colleagues and drinking buddies at industry events, but Mitchum was not welcome at Duke's house. What makes El Dorado even more interesting is that Wayne agreed to make it anyway, and the chemistry between them on screen proves that whatever happened off-screen, these two men knew how to work together. Fact number 3. The cinematographer came out of retirement for this one film. Howard Hawks had a reputation for demanding excellence from every member of his crew, and for El Dorado, he wanted a specific cinematographer behind the camera. The problem was that the man he wanted had retired 7 years earlier. Harold Rawson was a legend in Hollywood, who had shot The Wizard of Oz and Singin' in the Rain. 5 Academy Award nominations sat on his resume, along with an honorary Oscar for The Garden of Allah back in 1936. 1958 was the year he walked away from the industry, and that's when Hawks personally persuaded Rawson to pick up his camera one more time. El Dorado became Harold Rawson's final film. After wrapping production, he retired again, permanently this time, which means every shot, every frame, every play of light and shadow represents the final artistic statement of a man who helped create some of cinema's most iconic images. Fact number 4. The original script killed John Wayne's character. This might be the most surprising fact on our entire list. Leigh Brackett, the screenwriter Hawks hired to adapt Harry Brown's novel The Stars in Their Courses, wrote a script that killed Cole Thornton at the end. Brackett herself described her original draft as the best script she had ever done in her life. A story that wasn't conventionally tragic, but one where Wayne's character died at the conclusion. Powerful and moving, and completely unacceptable to Howard Hawks. As production approached, Hawks pushed for changes because he didn't want a tragic Western. What he wanted was to make Rio Bravo again, the winning formula, the proven structure, the guaranteed box office success, which meant Cole Thornton had to live. Brackett complied, but she wasn't happy about it. John Wayne would survive, the tragic ending would disappear, and the best script Leigh Brackett ever wrote would never be filmed. Fact number 5. The screenwriter called it The Son of Rio Bravo Rides Again. Leigh Brackett didn't just dislike the rewrites, she openly mocked them. As Hawks pushed the script further and further toward Rio Bravo territory, Brackett gave the project a new name behind the scenes and called it The Son of Rio Bravo Rides Again. Her own words tell the story best. The more we got into doing Rio Bravo over again, the sicker I got because I hate doing things over again. That's a striking admission from a professional screenwriter being paid good money to work on a major Hollywood production with one of the industry's most respected directors. The irony is that El Dorado outperformed Rio Bravo at the box office, and Hawks had no patience for criticism on this point. His response to journalists was blunt: "I'm not a damn bit interested in whether somebody thinks this is a copy of it, because the copy made more money than the original, and I was very pleased with it." Fact number 6. A major continuity error became an intentional joke. Here's a behind-the-scenes story that captures the collaborative spirit on the El Dorado set. Robert Mitchum's character, Sheriff J.P. Hara, gets shot in the right leg during the film and spends much of the movie using a crutch. The problem was that Mitchum kept switching which arm he used the crutch on, sometimes under his right arm, sometimes under his left, and in the chaos of production, nobody caught it until it was too late. John Wayne came up with an idea to add dialogue that acknowledged the inconsistency, turning the mistake into a joke rather than trying to hide it. Wayne knew something about continuity errors because back when he was a college football player at USC in the 1920s, he worked continuity on silent films. Hawks loved the solution, and in the finale of El Dorado, Wayne's character actually mentions the crutch switching to Mitchum's character. Both characters end up with their crutches under the wrong arm, and the film winks at the audience about it. Fact number 7. James Caan wore 3-inch lifts throughout the entire production. James Caan was a young actor on the rise when Hawks cast him as Mississippi in El Dorado. Talented, charismatic, and approximately 5 feet 7 inches tall, while John Wayne stood 6 feet 4 inches. That height difference created a visual problem because in scene after scene, Caan would be standing next to Wayne looking almost comically short. For a character who was supposed to be a credible partner to Cole Thornton, this wouldn't work. The solution was elevator shoes, and Caan wore 3-inch lifts throughout the entire production. Every scene, every take, every day on set, he was walking around on hidden platforms inside his boots. Caan admitted this openly in interviews years later, and it adds a new dimension to those scenes where Mississippi walks alongside Cole Thornton, knowing that every step Caan took required extra effort just to appear appropriately sized for the role. If you're enjoying these behind-the-scenes secrets, hit that subscribe button right now. There's so much more about classic westerns that you've never heard, and you won't want to miss what's coming next. Fact number 8. Wayne filled Caan's dressing room floor to ceiling with garbage. The relationship between John Wayne and James Caan started rocky and got stranger from there. Wayne was a legendary prankster on set who also had a habit of testing young actors. According to Caan's own account from a 1997 Tonight Show appearance, Wayne would try to intimidate newcomers, and if he could intimidate you, he'd stay on you forever until you just crumbled. With Caan, Wayne kept giving the young actor directions that contradicted what Hawks wanted. Caan would follow Wayne's advice, Hawks would criticize him, Wayne would give different advice, and Caan would follow that only to get criticized again. It was psychological warfare disguised as helpful mentoring. Caan eventually snapped, and he admitted on national television that he was about to physically attack John Wayne. His exact words were, "I was gonna hit him." Robert Mitchum had to physically restrain the young actor before the situation escalated. But here's the thing, once Wayne saw that Caan wouldn't crumble, that he had real fire in him, the hazing transformed into friendship, a friendship built on mutual sabotage. Caan started disrupting Wayne's takes by mouthing the words "you snake" at Wayne during Duke's close-ups, making the veteran actor laugh and ruining the shot. Wayne's retaliation was spectacular. He had Caan's dressing room filled, floor to ceiling, with garbage. Caan recalled how garbage just came out, describing how Wayne piled it with garbage, saying he was like a 12-year-old kid. This is John Wayne we're talking about, one of the biggest movie stars in history, a man in his late 50s at the time, stuffing a coworker's dressing room with trash like a fraternity pledge. Fact number 9. Robert Mitchum invented the bathtub scene himself. One of the most memorable comic moments in El Dorado is the scene where Robert Mitchum's character gets embarrassed while in the bathtub when a woman enters unexpectedly. The big tough sheriff reduced to covering himself and sputtering with discomfort, and that scene wasn't in the script because Mitchum invented it. The crew reportedly laughed throughout the filming at the image of the famously tough Mitchum playing embarrassment and vulnerability. This was an actor known for his cool detachment and unflappable presence, and seeing him flustered in a bathtub was comedy gold precisely because it was so against type. Hawks was famous for encouraging improvisation and on-set creativity, giving his performers room to experiment, and Mitchum took full advantage of that freedom. Fact number 10. The same artist both painted the credits and appeared on screen. The opening credits of El Dorado feature beautiful Western artwork that sets the tone for the film, all created by Olaf Weghorst, one of the most celebrated Western artists of the 20th century. But here's what most viewers miss. Weghorst didn't just contribute his paintings to El Dorado, he also appears in the film as a character, playing Swede Larsson, the gunsmith. Those gorgeous paintings in the credits and that old Swedish gunsmith later in the film are the same person in two completely different capacities. Weghorst's work wasn't just appreciated by film directors either, as his paintings were owned by 3 United States presidents including Eisenhower, Ford, and Reagan. This was an artist at the absolute peak of his field, and Hawks convinced him to both provide artwork and perform on camera, a unique doubling that most viewers never notice. Fact number 11. Hawks included a hidden reference to a French New Wave director. Howard Hawks was an old Hollywood master, but he paid attention to what the young filmmakers in Europe were doing, and El Dorado contains a subtle nod to French director François Truffaut. There's a scene where Robert Mitchum's character shoots a piano because he suspects a killer might be hiding behind it, and this is a deliberate reference to Truffaut's 1960 film Shoot the Piano Player. Hawks admired Truffaut, and the admiration was mutual since the French New Wave directors considered Hawks one of the great American auteurs. Most audiences in 1967 had no idea what Hawks was doing with that scene because it played perfectly well as a moment of comic paranoia. But for those who caught the reference, it was a wink across the Atlantic. Fact number 12. Wayne wore a belt buckle from his first Hawks collaboration. Look closely at John Wayne's costume in El Dorado and you'll notice something significant. He wears a belt buckle featuring the Red River D brand. Red River was Wayne's first collaboration with Howard Hawks. Released back in 1948, the film that transformed Wayne from a popular Western star into a serious dramatic actor. The Red River D brand was central to that film's story. By wearing that buckle in El Dorado 18 years later, Wayne was making a statement, acknowledging the history he shared with Hawks and connecting their current work to their past triumph. This kind of detail might seem small, but it reflects the deep professional relationship between Wayne and Hawks, men who had been making films together for nearly 2 decades and had developed a shorthand, a shared history, a mutual understanding of what they were trying to accomplish. Fact number 13. The film's release was delayed over a year to avoid Steve McQueen. Here's a piece of Hollywood strategy that most people don't know about. Principal photography on El Dorado wrapped on January 28, 1966, and a private screening was held on April 22 of that year. The film was finished and ready to go, but American audiences didn't see El Dorado until June 7, 1967, a delay of more than a year from when the film was completed. The reason was that Paramount Pictures didn't want 2 westerns competing against each other. They had a Steve McQueen vehicle called Nevada Smith that they wanted to push without competition, so they held El Dorado back. Japan actually got the world premiere on December 17, 1966. When El Dorado finally opened in America, it came out a full month after Wayne's other 1967 release, The War Wagon. Films were assets to be deployed according to market conditions, not products to be released as soon as they were finished, and El Dorado sat on a shelf for over a year because Paramount was protecting their Steve McQueen investment. Fact number 14. James Caan and his co-star got engaged but never married. The chemistry between James Caan and Michele Carey, who played Josephine Joey MacDonald, wasn't just good acting. During or shortly after production, the two became engaged. Carey had almost not gotten the role because Hawks initially wanted an actress named Mariana Hill, but Hill was about to sign with Paramount, so Carey was hired instead. That twist of casting fate led to an off-screen romance, but the engagement never led to marriage. For whatever reason, Caan and Carey went their separate ways, a Hollywood story as old as the industry itself, where co-stars fall for each other during production, make plans for a future together, and then watch those plans dissolve once the cameras stop rolling. Caan would go on to marry and divorce 3 times, and his career would explode with The Godfather just 6 years after El Dorado. Fact number 15. Footage from El Dorado appears in Wayne's final film. John Wayne made his last film in 1976, a movie called The Shootist that told the story of an aging gunfighter dying of cancer. Given that Wayne himself had battled cancer and would die from the disease just 3 years later, it was a painfully appropriate finale. The opening of The Shootist includes a montage sequence showing the gunfighter's past exploits, and to illustrate that backstory, the filmmakers used footage from several of Wayne's earlier westerns. El Dorado is one of the films represented in that montage. When you watch The Shootist, you're seeing Wayne's final film incorporate his earlier work with Hawks. It's a kind of retrospective within the narrative, a way of connecting the dying character to Wayne's own cinematic history. This gives El Dorado an unexpected significance, because it's not just a standalone Hawks western, it's part of the visual eulogy for John Wayne himself. Fact number 16. John Carpenter made Assault on Precinct 13 because of this film. John Carpenter is one of the most influential directors in horror and action cinema, the man behind Halloween, The Thing, and Escape from New York. What many people don't know is that Carpenter's 1976 breakthrough, Assault on Precinct 13, was directly inspired by El Dorado and Rio Bravo. Carpenter originally wanted to make a Howard Hawks-style western with the siege structure, the diverse band of unlikely allies, and the combination of action and character humor all coming from his love of Hawks' work. But his budget was only $100,000, and he couldn't afford horses and period costumes, so he modernized the concept and set it in contemporary Los Angeles instead of the Old West. Carpenter's admiration for Hawks went even further. For his editing credit on Assault on Precinct 13, he used the pseudonym John T. Chance, which is the name of John Wayne's character in Rio Bravo. He also named his lead character Leigh after Leigh Brackett, the screenwriter who worked on both Rio Bravo and El Dorado, and when Carpenter made Halloween 2 years later, he included a character named Sheriff Leigh Brackett. The influence of Hawks westerns echoed through Carpenter's entire career. Fact number 17. The jail set is identical to Rio Bravo. Hawks didn't just remake Rio Bravo conceptually, he literally used the same physical location. Both films were shot at Old Tucson Studios in Arizona, and the jail set where so much of the action takes place in El Dorado is the same jail set from Rio Bravo. Watch the two films back to back, and you can see the identical architecture, the same windows, the same door frames. Hawks made his trilogy using the same building because Rio Bravo, El Dorado, and later Rio Lobo all used this location. It's as if Hawks found a set he liked and refused to let it go. For modern viewers, this creates an interesting viewing experience, where you can watch these films and notice how Hawks and his various cinematographers shot the same space differently. Production crews renovated the storefronts on Front Street at Old Tucson specifically for El Dorado, but that jail set remained a constant. Fact number 18. A scene was cut from television broadcasts. El Dorado contains a scene that modern audiences rarely see. In the original theatrical release, James Caan's character Mississippi disguises himself as a Chinese person, squinting his eyes and speaking in mock Asian gibberish. This scene has been removed from television broadcasts of the film for decades because contemporary standards recognize it as racially insensitive. If you've only seen El Dorado on television, you may never have encountered this scene, and it exists in some home video releases, but its presence in the original film has been effectively erased from the broadcast version. El Dorado, like many classics of its era, carries the marks of its time, and that scene reflects attitudes common in 1960s Hollywood that would never make it into a film today. Fact number 19. Wayne promised a co-star more work and kept his word. Christopher George played Nels McLeod, the scarred hired gun who serves as one of the film's villains. It was a memorable performance that brought genuine menace to a role that could have been forgettable. John Wayne was impressed enough to make a promise on set, telling George that he would work with him again. And that's what happened. Wayne kept that promise by casting George in Chisholm in 1970 and The Train Robbers in 1973. When John Wayne told you he wanted to work with you again, it wasn't just Hollywood talk because he meant it. Wayne noticed talent. He remembered people who did good work, and when he had the power to give someone another opportunity, he followed through. For Christopher George, that promise from Wayne on the El Dorado set led to 2 more significant roles in his career. Fact number 20. The singer of the title song is virtually untraceable. The song El Dorado opens the film with lyrics that paraphrase Edgar Allan Poe's 1849 poem El Dorado. Nelson Riddle, famous for his work with Frank Sinatra, composed the music, and John Gabriel, who also appears in the film as the character Pedro, wrote the lyrics. George Alexander performed the vocal backed by the Melloman Quartet. Here's where it gets strange. Almost nothing is known about George Alexander, despite performing the title song for a major Hollywood western, despite being credited in the film, despite his voice being heard by millions of viewers over nearly 60 years, George Alexander remains essentially untraceable. A comment on YouTube from someone claiming to be the son of the original singer states that another vocalist was originally hired but was replaced by Alexander just 2 weeks before filming. The Western Writers of America included El Dorado in their top 100 Western songs of all time, yet the man who sang it has disappeared into history. Who was George Alexander? Where did he come from? And what happened to him after El Dorado? Are questions that remain unanswered to this day. The story of El Dorado extends far beyond what we see on screen. It's a story of Hollywood legends who only collaborated once, of personal feuds and professional reconciliation, of pranks and lifts in boots and garbage-filled dressing rooms, of a screenwriter who hated what her work became, and a director who didn't care because it made money. Howard Hawks was 72 years old when he directed El Dorado, and John Wayne was 59, having survived lung cancer just 2 years earlier. Robert Mitchum was 49, and working with a man whose wife had banned him from the house. These weren't young filmmakers full of energy and optimism. These were veterans who had seen everything Hollywood could throw at them, and yet they created something that audiences still watch and love today. 96% of reviews on Rotten Tomatoes are positive, and critics who dismissed it in 1967 as a mere retread of Rio Bravo have been proven wrong by time. Hawks himself had the final word on the subject, saying, "I made Rio Bravo with John Wayne. It worked out pretty well and we both liked it, so a few years later we decided to make it again. Worked out pretty good that time too." When Leigh Brackett protested that audiences wouldn't accept a retread, Hawks and Wayne told her if it worked once, it'll work again. And they were right. El Dorado earned $12 million on a budget of $4,653,000, ranked 19th at the box office for 1967, and became the second highest-grossing Western of the year, just behind Wayne's own The War Wagon. The collaboration between Hawks and Wayne didn't end there because they made Rio Lobo in 1970, completing what fans call the unofficial trilogy. But Hawks was deeply critical of that final film, calling it that damn piece of junk, and blaming budget constraints, saying they needed 2 good people, and otherwise his story wasn't any good. Hawks wanted Mitchum to return for Rio Lobo, but Mitchum declined, prompting Wayne to say, "Mitch has been retiring ever since the first day I met him." That comment captures something essential about these men. They knew each other, had worked together, fought together, pulled pranks on each other, and created something that would outlast all of them. Wayne died in 1979, Mitchum in 1997, and Hawks in 1977. But El Dorado remains. Every time someone discovers this film for the first time, every time a grandfather shows it to a grandchild, every time a Western enthusiast revisits it after years away, the work these men did in 1965 and 66 comes alive again. The stories behind the camera are now just as fascinating as what happened in front of it. From a cinematographer coming out of retirement for one last job, to a screenwriter mourning the death of her best work. From a young actor wearing 3-inch lifts while trying not to punch John Wayne to a belt buckle connecting a film to its 18-year-old predecessor, all the way to a title song sung by a man history has forgotten. These 20 hidden facts don't diminish El Dorado, they enrich it. They remind us that every film is the product of dozens of creative decisions, personal conflicts, happy accidents, and professional compromises. What we see on screen is just the polished surface of something much messier and more human underneath. Quentin Tarantino cited the Hawks trilogy when explaining why he plans to retire early, saying he doesn't want to make Rio Lobo, referring to directors who stick around past their creative prime. The film Get Shorty from 1995 includes a conversation that explains the relationship between Rio Bravo and El Dorado to a new generation. Nearly 60 years after its release, people are still watching El Dorado, still talking about it, still discovering things they never noticed before. That's the definition of a classic, and now you know 20 things about it that most people don't. If you love classic westerns and want to keep learning the stories behind the legends, make sure to like this video, leave a comment telling us your favorite John Wayne film, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss another deep dive into Hollywood history. Click the notification bell so you know the moment we post our next video. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.